Okay, welcome to the session.
Where is the? It's okay. We'll do it, right?
In Asia. My name is Anselmo Lee. I'm the regional coordinator of the APSD, the Asia Civil Society Partnership for SDG. I'm a moderator of this session. This session is organized jointly by APSD and KCOC, Korea NGO Council for Overseas Development Cooperation, in partnership with the APD. So we are very happy to have this session and also welcome to this session. So let me introduce very briefly about what we have achieved together. This is one of the many sessions. We have to make sure that we deliver key message to you so that at the end of the day, you take something meaningful when you go home. Okay. So we have, as you know, 5 or 6 speakers, but I will invite them after presenting the PowerPoint, the big screen. Okay. Key issue is SDG second summit. And as you know, this year is the midpoint of the 15-year SDG journey. And then last week, probably US Secretary General was for this session. So he issued a special edition of SDG progress report. By the way, have you ever seen that report? Please raise your hand. Except speaker. Participant. Have you ever seen the report, special edition of UN Secretary report on SDG? So not annual one, but last 7 years. 7 years. Nobody. Oh yeah. That's the reason that we want to introduce at the same time. It's a second summit in September to discuss what has happened the last 7 years in terms of SDG implementation globally and regionally and also nationally in Asia. So we have prepared a 2-slide PowerPoint to help you to put it into the global context. Okay, this one, as you know, ADB, while we are having this ADB meeting, there are global summits. Every year we have a 4 summits and also one, the regular, the climate conference. As you know, UN, this year we have a second summit. This is one of the series of the global summit by UN. The last year we have a transformative education summit in accordance with the UN Secretary General's our common agenda, 3 action plan. And then 2024 we have a summit of the future, the 2025 social summit. So these are series of summits. So we want to put our discussion in the context of this global summit together with the other summit outside the UN. So as you know, we have a G20 summit this year, India, and G7 summit this year, Japan, or in Asia. Asia is the center of the global summit. And also climate, also Asia again, Dubai, Arab Emirates. So all the place in Asia. And also we have a BRICS summit. The last year was in China, this year go to South Africa. So these are the very important geopolitical meetings which we want to discuss together with the UN to make a connection between outside, inside the UN, and also climate. So we have invited several speakers who will speak about climate. Of course, SDG summit is a common, but also G7, G8, so that we can make it more relevant to CSO and also. Okay, second, this one, and so we had the SDG monitoring framework globally, regionally, and nationally. Globally, as you know, every year we have a UN Secretary General report, annual report. Usually, I think that's only May, to prepare for high-level political forum in July. And then every 4 years, we have a global sustainable development report by science group. So I think it will be draft is available, but full report will be soon. So we have a short every year and then midterm 4 years. And especially this year, last week, special edition of US SDG progress report. which is very important to have an overview of the last 7 years. And also in terms of CSO and multi-stakeholder engagement, we have a MGOS, Major Group Other Stakeholder Report, and Spotlight Report, and also SDSEN, the Social Leaders Coalition Network, they have also global report. These are really mainly global. But when it comes to national, of course, we have a national, voluntary national review. All the Asian government already submitted at least once, except Myanmar, because of military coup. And globally, except United States, almost every country participates in the VNR. And also local government, city, they also participate voluntarily local 2030, the cities. So we have a national local report to the UN. And also civil society, we have a people's scorecard project, which we are going to also introduce briefly. Action for Sustainable Development, which is a global umbrella organization, SDG monitoring and advocacy. So APSD is a part of this A4SD, and the National Spotlight Report, and also National SDS Report. So these are the existing monitoring framework and the report. So based on this one, we want to share with you, what's happening now, the SDG implementation. Okay, so we have a global and also national, regional, so that we can have a more discussion, more contextual, and also interconnect. Not only SDG, but not only outside, inside. Okay, that's the purpose of this session. So with this background, I would like to invite the speakers. But before that, I'd like to invite Secretary of KCOC to give us a warm welcome, although we are very warm.
Yeah.
So let's do the big hands together.
How was the lecture? I said it was lecture. 여러분 환영합니다. Welcome to Korea and welcome to this civil society event. I would like to express my deep appreciation to the people who and the organization who made this event possible. The APB is the one who really helping this organizing everything, and Haley and Roselle, who are the one who is behind this. They are, I think, from before they joined. Yesterday I heard before they joined the APB, they had a civil society, quite extensive civil society organizations experience. So I think they share APB and also the civil society background. So that may be the reason, one of the reasons why we have such a good program today. The topic of today's session is the assessment of implementation of sustainable development. And I think the reason why this is quite appropriate and the good timing for us to have assessment is two. I think one is the sustainable development SDG is facing its biggest challenge, I think, in decades. And I think the number one is the foundation of SDG. The foundation we stand on is somehow weakening and collapsing. The foundation is one word, the globalized world, the unified world. But now the world is becoming more and more divided world. So I think this fundamental philosophical foundation is weakening. So this is one of the greatest fundamental challenge in implementing SDG. And I think the second one is a speed of change. Accelerating speed of change is something we are facing right now. And over the last 3 years, the pandemic is accelerating, and now ChatGPT may be also accelerating some changes in many respects. So all these changes, I think, is making us a very complex issue in achieving SDG, declining civic, declining democracy and shrinking civic society, and all this environment is not so positive in having this achieving our goal. So simply repeating the same logic and so it's saying appeal, I think it's not enough for us now. So simply sharing vision and value is not also enough. Joint action and fundamental soul searching, the foundation of SDG, I think is critical at this moment. So this is, I hope that during this session, I hope we can have some insight on this fundamental aspect. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you can have a great, meaningful time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Joe. We call him Ambassador because he used to be the Korean ambassador to Canada, but now back to civil society. Thank you once again for your welcome. So now let me invite us 6 speakers to the podium. Please come. Let's give a big hand to the people. So they are sitting and standing. Standing moderating. You are sitting the speakers. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. This session is going to be interactive, which means you can have a chance to intervene, ask questions. I will invite you to give us some comments while we are having the conversation. 6 speakers. So I'll introduce one by one later, not now, when they speak. As you see, we have a gender balance and also all kinds of balance. Ex-militants expertise. So some expert you can find out later on expert on climate and SDG, a partnership nationally, regionally, and globally. So the first, we have 5 guiding questions. First one is overall assessment, overall assessment of SDG last 7 years. And then we will go to the global process, as I mentioned, the education and the pitch of the summit, UN Secretary General engaging with. And then we will come down to the national level, what's happening national level in terms of SDG engagement, in terms of civil society monitoring and engagement. And lastly, we will discuss role of youth. Of course, everybody involved, but especially role of youth. Okay, so these are the guiding questions for our conversation. The first, let me invite Uchita, the first one. He's one of the best experts on climate since 1992. Maybe some of you are not born, 1992. First, the EU summit. Since then, he has been engaged in the sustainable development. So, Mr. Sustainability. So, but he prepared a PowerPoint. Okay, I'm very much concerned about this PowerPoint because this is a summary of 1 semester lecture. So he's going to give you in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So we are very lucky to have this lecture in 5 minutes. It's like a keynote presentation of a big picture, where we are in terms of the sustainability. All right. We have 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, let me thank the organizers for organizing this, engaging civil society and inviting me as well. First of all, I'll try to give 6 messages in the 5 slides and bear with me. First thing is that my response to the underlying theme of the ADB conference, Rebound in Asia, Recover, Reconnect and Reform. Let me at the outset state that the way I look at it, we need to recalibrate Asia, we need to recalibrate the world. I will argue it when I come to the end. And that requires reimagining, reorganizing and reinvesting. We can't be tinkering around the bushes and talking reforms all the time and just making small adjustments. The first part of it is about losing sight of the transformation. The 2030 agenda is all about transforming our world. But the word transformation is hardly used, and we talk about thematic 17 SDGs and the associated targets. The indicators are not even discussed most of the time. The world at the moment is not just losing sight of the transformation agenda, but if you look at what has been happening, the world is in new breakdown situations. COVID-19 was one of the induced breakdown situations in the world, and we keep on talking about climate change. The climate COP28 is coming, and we keep on talking the same thing. The same way, if you look at what is happening to poverty, and we don't need to keep on saying this because the UN has come up with a report and it says that we have lost sight of it and the agenda achievement will be going to through the century now, not 2030. We had agenda 21, which was for 21st century. We came to agenda 2030, which means that we had an increased rapid transformation to save the earth. So we are not doing that. Okay, I've gone back to that. Can we go back to slides? Next one, please. Okay, so let me come to the civic space part of this. The most important thing about transformation is if it is inclusive. If it is not inclusive, then you are deciding for singular or sectoral better words, not for all, leaving no one behind, has just been used without much meaning. The second part of that is that civil society, as much as they shout about the space for civil society, we must also be engaging with all stakeholders. That is critically important. The SDGs, now in Sri Lanka, we had established a stakeholder platform, and the critical part is independent monitoring, evaluation, and review mechanism. We have established a transformation, SDG transformation lab. We did this for 6 months continuously, bringing over 200 experts, over 260 organizations, including all the provincial councils where the subnational governments are left out of the planning implementation. And most of the ministries are. So we bring them in as well. I'm going to the next slide, please, to explain. This is critically important. The voluntary national reviews have become a meaningless exercise where it does not provide a snapshot of the world, nor a country, nor it does not make the high-level political forum any high-level, nor political. These are voluntary, and anybody can write any document and submit it to the high-level political forum and just get away with it. And those reviews do not have methodological assessments. In Sri Lanka, because this was happening too much, I was the chief negotiator for Sri Lanka 2 years in a row as the advisor to the government 2016 and 17. But the report writing is just an art of pacifying. And that is not what a VNR is. So we created the world's first voluntary people's review, or VPR. Hold on to that, please. Nobody else do it. We do it on 2 methodological scales. One, we call it a microsystem. The 169 targets with the 244 global indicators with local baselines and indicators taken into. In a world which says that we don't have data, there's a data democracy problem more than lack of data. How do you constitute data, information, and right to information? Second part is much more serious, which is not done, is the macro assessment. I can't show you that. It's 30 large-scale transformative actions from integration, mainstreaming, coherence, localizing, financing, and the transformation itself. But for the first time in the world, we adopted a -5 to +5 rating scale. This was also done by 14 or 20 other countries with A4SD in a different way, but it was. But if you look at, I don't have time for an update, but look at all the countries, including Sri Lanka. The SDGs are just going through its motions and putting the logos more than anything else, and trying to raise funds in a very different project-centered manner, not in an inclusive manner, not in an integrated manner. So civil society also cannot just be doing feel-good, emotional, statement-based reports. If you want to be relevant, if you want to be heard, if you want to change the world, then you must be methodological. My last slide. No, 1, 2. No, please go back to the previous one. Yeah. So in 2020, 2021, we came up with the first ever domestic resource mobilization. I think SDG 17.4. We talk about financing, the billions to trillions discussion around it. But please understand that at the end of the day, the responsibility and onus of transformation lies with the nation state and the governments. And the begging bowl has not worked. If you look at, we have $3.5 billion deficit in the developing country alone. And from 2.5 initially to 3.5, it has jumped. And all the financing mechanisms of blended financing has not transformed. One more point on that. We have a transformative agenda agreed by 193 countries, but we keep the financing and trade agenda completely separate as a different track. And we are not getting any kind of equity and justice in this. I lost. This is the message that I want. I know there's a SDG summit coming, but there's a more important one called the Future Summit coming in 2020. The SDG summit, and if you look at the midterm readings, you will see how disheartening where the world is on the SDGs are. The Future Summit must be people's planetary futures. In 1992, I was part of the steering committee, first ever organizing the NGO alternative treaties in Rio 1992 Earth Summit as a steering committee member of 100 treaties. In 2012, on the Rio Summit, People's Sustainable Treaties, and with the support of all of you, engagement of all of you. When I say all of you, it is not just about civil society. Civil society is as much as part of the world as any other sector. And declarations of people's planetary futures, I have proposed this now, beginning of this year. Let's see how it gets rolled on. Thank you so much.
Wow, it's very hot. It put fire for our process. So let's cool down a little bit. Okay, don't worry. If you sign the attendance list, we will share with you this PowerPoint immediately after this session, and also his email address, so you can contact him for more details. Okay, now so let me invite each the speaker to share your view about the UN Secretary General report. UN Secretary made a press conference. He said after 7 years assessment, do you remember how many percent of the SDG target the on track? There are different ways of assessing. One is on track, right track, or slow track, or behind the track, or off the track. So there are many. So according to UN Secretary General, he said, let me read, only 12% of the targets are on track. So that means more than 90% of the targets are off, slow, or behind. That's a reality. So let me ask our civil society colleague, what do you think about this overall assessment, whether you share or you have a different opinion? So before that, let me briefly introduce 5 speakers. Urna from Mongolia. She's one of the best experts on development and human rights. So they produce a lot of human rights monitoring report and also SDG monitoring report. So she will contribute a human rights-based approach to this SDG in the Mongolian context. So she's a chairperson of CHRD, Center for Human Rights and Development. And Aoi Horiuchi is from Japan. He's a Jani, like a KCOC. He's a CSO platform on ODA. So Jani with a JICA, KCOC with a COICA. So he's a national platform. And also Jani is very much involved in the international, especially G7 and G20 summit. So he will speak about also the C7 summit, which concluded the last month, and also a bit about G20. And then Jae Shin, she's a policy director from KCOC. So she'll speak about partnership, government civil partnership on ODA, especially the SDG target 17. And also Le Santiago from ASPE, Asia South Pacific, the adult and basic and adult education. Is an expert on education and also the global system education. So she will speak about transformative education summit, which is very important, which I was able to ago. And then Sam Guiva is from ADB, so you are free to touch about any issue. Personal point of view or ADB point of view, it's up to you. Okay, so let me begin with the Urna. So what do you think about the special edition of SDG book?
Yeah.
What's your view?
Actually, I was very sad when thank you very much. Yeah, actually, I was very sad when I saw this watched this press conference. And then I accepted it. I think that it shows the whole situation. Because, referring to our assessment, People's Scorecard we did last year on the status of SDGs implementation in Mongolia. And we saw that only one SDG actually on track in Mongolia. The other SDGs, they are all regressing or stagnating. So I think that this means that if the whole SDG implementation is like around 10%, then in Mongolia, probably it's around 5%, twice less than the global.
Global, okay, that's the Mongolia situation. So you mentioned about regressing or stagnating, because the UN report always progressing, the progress report. But it was the Uchita who proposed, let's be realistic, this is a regress. So now NGO, we have a report, both regress and progress. Maybe you can send a message to UN, or change the title of UN report. The reality is a regressing. What about Japan, Howie? Your point of view?
Thank you. Yes, if we compare the results with a school exam, 90% failure is almost failure. 10% now. And if you look at the reality, and the reported reality is different, of course. So if you look at the Japan score, like for example, in the equality of education, they might achieve, they might say they each achieve, but if you look at the reality, if you go to the school or the people lives in society, it's quite devastating situations. So I think the quality and quantity should be also measured in terms of evaluating the progress.
Okay, thank you. According to SDSM report, Japan ranks 19th out of 165, highest in Japan, but you don't feel that way, right? Reality on the ground is different from the rank, right? So that's what we have to see, There's a quantitative data and then what people's perception and experience on the ground. What about Korea, Karen-chin?
Yeah, actually, I agree on the Secretary General's report. And I want to express this is a Blackpink and BTS. Yeah, because we between the pink era or pink world, but actually this situation is very black. But we still have a hope. So black, there is a pink, so black pink. And what is BTS thing? So we want to dream about better transition to survival world, not sustainable. We need survival now. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Wow. So new definition of BTS. BTS means a better transition to survival. Okay. Are you Ani? Next time, please invite the BTS to Anyway, today we have a new genes. Okay, now there you are the youngest panel member from Philippines. So what do you think about this UN Secretary report?
Oh yes, thank you so much everybody for joining us today. I'm APSD and I would just like to acknowledge my privilege in being able to speak in this panel. From the regional perspective, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that all of the SDGs are already off track. And there are profound disparities in terms of access to education due to intersecting factors related to your gender, your indigeneity, your language, your socioeconomic status, your location. And all of these come into play when you access education. And so, according to the UNESCO Asia Pacific Progress Report, only 14.4% of the SDGs have been achieved. And we have an estimated time of 42 more years. And are you guys ready to do this for 42 more years?
How many years?
42.
42 years.
Yes, in the Asia Pacific region.
That's the reason.
So it's just a little over 14% that has been, and we're already at the midpoint mark. This is the final decade of action. And yet 50%, we should be at 50%, and yet we're not there yet. So overall progress is really slow.
Okay, so very slow.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam.
Thank you very much for the organizers for having AD be part of this. I really appreciate it. I share your concerns with the progress that's happening in the region. Maybe three separate points. First, I think in the current situation where we are just recovering from COVID and coming back from 3 years of setback, right? Significant setback in our region from COVID. And I've lived in the Philippines where they had the probably strictest lockdown anywhere in the world for the longest period of time. And another is disruptions. And then, of course, we're still, the situation in Ukraine still continues to bog down the global economy with food security issues, and people's attention going into that rather than the broader development issues. So yes, that's the condition we're living in. I think, and as I said, that you're right in that we are off track or behind schedule. But I also want to say that there's some hope there, because in the end, there has been progress. If you look back at the establishment of the SDGs in the first place, it took a lot of effort. It took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort. There was a lot of discussion, okay? There were those that felt that they were not ambitious enough. There were those that felt that they were too ambitious and wanted it watered down a little bit. So I think that the SDGs are a midpoint of where things could be. So what I want to say is, let's not lose track of the gains that we have made. I also think that in ADB terms, and this is what I'm hoping to see, if we do a project, we have what's called an S curve. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to be it's not linear. What's the opposite of linear? Whatever. It's not going to be like, halfway through it's like 50%, 3/4 of the way through it's going to be 75%. It's going to start slow, and once you get things going, it's going to get faster and faster until you go up. With those of us who have studied development theory, we have this thing called modernization theory, where we go. It's the takeoff, right? You're at the terminal, the plane taxis to the runway, and you gather speed as you go up, and then you take off. And that's what we're looking for, the takeoff. I think let's keep track of where the shortcomings are. I think we need to reinvigorate ourselves and push harder. I think you put a slide earlier of all the global conferences that are taking place on climate, on the SDGs, on the G20G, and all these things. My fear, though, however, is that sometimes people look for glory. It's human nature. You look for glory. So a lot of effort was put into the initial design and the initial launching of the SDGs. There is no glory in implementation. It's just slogging through things, right? In APB, you get glory when you design a project. It's $1 billion project to build a bridge. Yes, and then once you're done, you pass it on to the next person. That person has to do the procurement, oversee the bridge, and then measure if the depth of the cement is big. There's no glory in that. And I think we're at the stage where there's no glory, and then people lose attention. So again, these bad numbers should reinvigorate us to do more. And I think civil society has the best role to keep prodding, to keep bringing this to the attention of everybody, that they should not be forgotten.
Okay, thank you, Sam. You think the glory is the name of K-drama? Okay, so this is the first round of warm-up. So overall assessment of SDG. That means SM said, now we really plan. It's like a learning curve, right? For 7 we have still 7 years to go. How can we illustrate? It will be the last question. So last question, take away your suggestion for our strategy. How to make the remaining 7 years because the time for success. Okay. So now let's go to one by one. As we presented, the second SC summit this year is one of the series of summit, right? Last year, education, next year, and with the future. So let me invite the lab once again briefly. What is the key message out of this transformative education summit last year?
Hi again, everyone. So last year, as some of you may know, the Transforming Education Summit happened in September 2022. And this was the steering of the United Nations Secretary General. And it was based on our common agenda report on the issues and recommendations that he thinks that it should be prioritized, and one of which is education. And let me look at my side of it. Well, so for the outcomes, just around something.
Yeah.
There were national consultations that have been convened in 163 countries and 133 national statements. So if you can look at the test website, you might want to find your country and see which commitments that they have come up with. It's mostly looking into inclusive education and the teachers' capacities into education styles. And one of the outcomes is the Youth Declaration, and it does outline the demands of the youth towards inclusion, towards the principles of leaving no one behind, towards making sure that marginalized groups have access to quality education, to inclusive education, and to making sure that there is financing for education. So those are the gist.
Okay, thank you very much. As you know, vote for education was one of the most affected SDG on the COVID-19. That's why I think the UN Secretary decided to have education in the summit. And then after that, we have this year SDG, but at the same time, as I said, we have a series of the global summit G7 and G20. Could you please share briefly about what's happening now the G7? Because G7 is a group that means outside the UN, but they're all talking about SDG in their final document. I don't know how serious they are about this SDG commitment. Please.
Thanks. But before I present, let me ask you, how many of you are from G7 countries? Japan, US, G7 country, are you?
Korea is not G7.
And how many people from G20 countries?
G20.
South Korea, Indonesia, India, Argentina. And how many are from BRICS countries?
BRICS.
India,
India,
China, South Africa. And how many are from non-G20 countries?
Non-G20 countries.
Many. Yes. G7. Okay. So whether you're from G7 countries or G20 countries, BRICS, as long as you are from civil societies, you are welcome to participate G7 process. Wow. Yes. G7 is exclusive for 7 countries plus EU, but civil society, G7 is open to everyone. So we decided to open the process, not only from G7 countries civil society, but also from around the world, especially from the global south. So this year's G7 summit will be held in 2 weeks in the middle of May in Hiroshima. So the G7 leaders will get together and discuss global economy, climate change, global health, humanitarian issues. So ahead of G7 leaders summit, we C7 or civil society 7 made a concrete proposal to the G7 leaders. This is a C7 communique 2023. We have established 6 different working groups on education, global health, climate change, economic issues, humanitarians, human rights and open societies, and nuclear disarmament, because the leaders summit will be in Hiroshima. So there are strong civil societies movement from Hiroshima, the local host city, to include recommendations from a civil society in the G7 leaders community. So we hope that nuclear disarmament issues would progress in the leaders summit in 2 weeks. So you can see that the communique has 6 working groups and policy recommendations, and we're going to have a press conference and press briefing in Hiroshima in 2 weeks. So that's how we monitor and we look at the final communique of G7 leaders will be out in 2 weeks. And we hope that the G7 communique have 3 A's. What is 3 A's? 1, ambitions. We need the G7 leaders to have ambitious goals. And 2, accountabilities. We all talk about accountability during the ADB's annual meetings. And of course, we want G7 leaders as accountable as possible. So ambitions, accountabilities, and finally, actions. Even though they are ambitious and accountable, we need concrete actions. So we have those recommendations on these topics, and we expect G7 leaders to come up with concrete actions towards a sustainable world.
Okay, thank you very much. Ambition, accountability, action, 3 keywords. Okay, so all the best for your advocacy next month in Hiroshima. And also we have a G20, but G20, not here, because we are going to have a discussion meeting on G20, civil society recommended G20, not here, but 4:30 from another room, CS Center. So if you are interested, you want to contribute, you are welcome to join another discussion. But like a C7, we have a C20 process. But unfortunately, this year, the civil society process was not very smooth in India. That's why we decided to create a parallel process, People's 20, so that some NGO can join inside, outside, so the more autonomous process. So these are the process. We'll share with you, since you signed in the participant list, we'll share the more information with you after this session. For the time constraints, let's skip this G20. Then let's move to the now, Sam, would you like to share your view about this summit, SDG summit or G7? You already mentioned, but in case you have any additional comment.
I do, and I don't. I think the summits are a process, and I'm on a personal point of view. I've been to the conferences, I've been to the UN General Assembly, I've been to these things, and sometimes I wonder what the value is. I think there's a lot of things, but there's a lot of work that goes into preparation of this. So I think it's a mixed thing. But I want to go back to the question you did about, what can we do? Is that the next one, or you want to start?
Next one.
Okay, next one. I won't touch that. So the conferences, I think, play an important role, but I think they're mixed. I don't think they're the most efficient way to go about doing anything. But sometimes so I think at the end of the day, it's really dependent on who is chair that year and the ambition of that country to chair and the ability of the country to bring everybody along the agenda of the country. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So G20, as I said, last year was Indonesia, so very successful. And then this year, India. And next year, we go to Brazil. And then 2025, we go to South Africa, all the BRICS countries. So we are very excited about what will happen, the coming 3 years in terms of the global, the inequality issues between the global South and global North. So now let's go down from the global to national. So in terms of monitoring, many CSO engage the SDG monitoring. So let me invite Guruna to share your experience of how the civil society in Mongolia monitoring and engage in the government on SDGs. So she has a few PowerPoint slides.
Thank you very much again. And I just want to show just tables, just graphs, if possible. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah. Okay. So we did this people's scorecard exercise to assess the SDG situation in Mongolia according to this methodology developed by Action for Sustainable Development, with also financial support of this organization. And we did it a little bit in a different way, not just, online surveying and inviting everyone, no. We did it like through a civil society consultations process, so that we have this Mongolian CSOs network on SDGs, and we have established an expert team from this network, consisting of 13 member organizations, and each of them were assigned to a specific SDG to lead the process assessment. And these organizations included the number of organizations working on the issues of specific to assigned SDG. For example, on SDG 1, for example, led the process led by Global Meridian NGO, in which included like 15 other organizations working on these poverty issues, for example. In like this way, we involved around 200 civil society organizations, and we did assessment on the 16 SDGs because we didn't assess the SDG 14 since we don't have a solution. So the process was like this, and we did numerous, after each of these consultations, we also did the validation discussion, presenting to all the expert team members in this way, like we did the scoring from -5 to +5. Minus means regress, it's going down, and then till +5 is progressing, and then if there is stagnation, no change at all, then we put just 0. And then what we found is that okay, so on what issues we assessed? We did scoring by 10 key areas. The one is the state policy parameter, which is the national development strategy, action planning, budget, whether there is then state policy and legal regulations, and then institutional capacity, whether there is institutional support from top to down, and then the cross sectors, and then also the implementation at national level, and then implementation at local level, the SDGs implementation. And then the next parameter was the next year. The next parameter was this on inclusiveness. whether there was monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, transparency and accountability, public awareness and understanding, in capacity building, and also inclusive participatory multi-stakeholder partnership, and then participation of civil society. So on these 10 key areas, we assessed each of the 16 SDGs, and we found that, if you look at this, actually this is on every SDG we did this time. Here is just on the SDG 6. If you see this, do you know SDG 6? This is the drinking water and sanitation, sanitation facilities. So that if you see on this, so we have only progress on policy and legal framework. On the other 9 areas, we have regress. So that after this, we gave, justifications why the organizations give such kind of score, so that explanation, the justifications, so there's etc. So that there's number of comments were given by the organizations involved in this discussions, consultations. And then, we can see now the whole, So these are for all SDGs. So we have this progress only on SDG 4, which is the red one, just 1 plus 1. The others are all, they're regressing. There's very small, like on SDG 12 and on SDG 15 is just very, very small. This is almost nothing, 0.2 or 0.1, it's almost nothing. So that on this, column, you see actually that we have only progress in SDG 4. And then next one. And then also the reasons, justifications, it's there. And then this is also on 10 key areas, on each of the SDGs on key areas. So what we found is that Mongolia made some progress only in national strategy, action plan, and budget, and then also this policy and legal framework. But on other 8 key areas, we have been just regress. Of course, there was a lot of, impact from this COVID, and this Ukraine-Russian war, and then also this border closure, etc. We consider all these, but at the same time, there's number of internal, factors which, being needed to be, actually tackled this by the government, but unfortunately it wasn't done. So that's why we have such a regress. And you can also see that where we have the most, regressing areas are this, like monitoring evaluation report. We don't have anything such. And we also have the public doesn't have any kind of capacity building on SDGs, so this is the second big one. And then also on this partnership process, and then of course this transparency and accountability. So that these are the things we have received. And when we were presented these results, to the Asian, this SDG workshops, and the Mongolia was, our scores for Mongolia was the lowest one among 10 other Asian countries, which actually did the same exercise to assess the SDGs situation. And we were a little bit concerned, because we didn't really expect that Mongolia is so low in this regard. And we, presented this, and we wanted to conduct, to the government agencies, because we should be honest, what we want to go circulate to the world. So we did this national consultation, and we invited all relevant ministries in the state agencies, and we presented it. Of course, some agreed, some agreed, but some were very critical. Some actually, asked, what is the methodology? How did you do it? But some were, said that let's go together. Let's do this exercise together. And then we also did this presentation to the second launch meeting, VNR launch meeting of Mongolian government, because Mongolia this year is doing VNR, and we presented it. And then from the audience, they actually very seriously suggested to do this exercise together. And we did this exercise, and I want to show you the comparison of, this blue, actually the scores given by civil society organizations, and orange are the scores given by the multi-stakeholders. Multi-stakeholders including, except the civil society organizations, it includes government agencies, independent researchers, private sector, and also other civil society organizations. And you can see that there's actually not big gap, very big gap where only in very few SDGs, like SDG 1, 2, and then SDG 6. On the others, there is no really change in terms of tendencies, but just in scores. So this means that it's kind of agreement, yeah. So that if we also these are the on 10 key areas, yeah. This is on 10 key areas. So again, through this the scores from the multi-stakeholders actually also same in tendency with the civil society organizations, that we had this progress in laws and strategies in budgets in somehow, but there was quite different in terms of the support, institutional support, etc. So I think that it's actually understandable. And okay, so you can see that. Well, actually this people's scorecard exercise helped us to somehow to advance our engagements with the different stakeholders. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for not giving enough time, because as you may know, this session is a joint. Initially, we presented two separate, so we are asked to merge. There are so many issues. When we time, apologies once again. As you see, we present to you this Mongolia case. I believe the Mongolia case is one of the best practice that as far as I know, among existing civil society. So we have the UN reports about SDG, but we don't know whether my country, whether it's also general, global, or regional. So this is only one, also together with the SDSN, Sustainable Development, but they cover only 165 countries. So I think it's important to bring the country-specific monitoring. That's why we are trying to promote this one as a tool for engagement with the government to identify gaps and challenges, so that we can have a better strategy for coming 7 years. Thank you once again, Mongolia. Congratulations. So Mongolia will be VNR this year. So she will come to New York, July to present, so that we can have a more meaningful dialogue. So before I invite two more persons from Korea, Japan. As you know, Korea, Japan is two OECD country. And that means a lot of ODA going to developing countries. That's why KCOC journey, working with the Japanese government to improve the quality of ODA, especially goal 1717. But before we move that issue, I want to ask, we have two presenters, one global assessment and national assessment. Do we have any question or comment on this before we go to the ODA? Anybody? Are you okay? Are you following? Too heavy? All right. Okay, this one hand up in the back. Please identify briefly yourself. Was it Laura? Oh, no, it's okay. Oh, no, it's okay. Okay, we can proceed. Okay, so let's proceed to the next agenda. So we have inside, right? Okay. Okay, now let's begin with the James from KCOC. How do you assess the role of ODA? Which means Korean government is responsible for both domestic implementing SDG at the same time international, which means helping developing countries. What is the assessment of Korean ODA on SDG implementation?
Yeah, actually, the Korean civil society point out several points. The first one is about the quantity level. So the Korea should increase the volume of ODA, because now it's currently Korea provides 0.16%. But it is the just the half of the average of OECD top countries provided. So Korean civil society ask our government to increase of the volume. And the second one is that the Korea should focus on the provision to the least developed countries. So our strategy countries not only not for the least developed countries. So the Korea focus on the national interest. So that's why we struggle between the government and civil society. And the third one is related to the climate crisis issues. So our government said expand the proportion of ODA projects relating to the climate sector above the OECD average, but still our government should abide by the consistent policy not investing in new coal-fired power plants in Indonesia or Vietnam. So lastly, and also Korea should increase a partnership with the local civil society because in terms of the real owner of their nation is the people. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. So you mentioned the number. Let me clarify the number. So you said 0.16. OECD average is 0.3.
0.3.
And then global target is 0.7% of GNI. Right? So Korea is far below 0.16. Although the ODA has been increasing gradually last 10 years, still very far. So what about Japan? How is Japan? Let's compare Korea Japan.
Which answer do you want? Short answer, long answer? Short answer.
Short
No, short answer is the same as Korea. Yes, Japanese government provide compared to the OECD average, quite low amount of ODA per GDP. I think it's 0.28% ODA, and they don't really focus on the least developing countries, and they actually blocking the climate negotiations at the UN conference. And they are quite hesitant to promote environmental friendly technologies. Although they promote the net zero policy, the way they promote is, exporting the coal power in Indonesia, Vietnam, and other Asian countries, as well as reactivating nuclear power. Oh, so that's a really problematic issue as well. And Japanese civil society, especially environment NGOs, are concerned about the newly established green transformation law. So overall, the same concerns from the Korean colleagues.
That means we have a common challenges.
Of course,
between Korea and Japan.
the partnership.
So you said 0.28, still under below average, right? The OECD 0.3. And then let me ask you one further question, because KCOC JANIC, you are partner, so-called partner with the JICA KOICA. What is the JICA KOICA policy on supporting civil society? There are two ways, to civil society and through civil society. So is there priority to support and work with the local CSO in developing countries, not JANIC and KCOC? How is your policy, Japan and Korea?
I don't think much progress has been happening for Japan's policy, JICA's policy, in terms of promoting partnership with local civil societies. Of course, they have a dialogue in countries where the government of Japan provides aid, but not really like a policy dialogue. It's more like implementing sessions on the ground. So and they usually do not provide support for the capacity development in local NGOs, although we ask them to do that, such as KOICA did in the other countries. So there are much things that we should do.
Okay. What about Belgium, Korea?
Yeah, actually, Korean government provides 2%, 2% among whole ODA to the civil society. It means not the local civil society whole. Yeah. So I cannot see any percent under maybe 0% to the local civil society. But you know the relationship between government and civil society in South Korea has changed a lot since 2018 because we developed we institutionalized the government and civil society partnership. So we established the policy and at this moment we struggle to develop and improve our partnership and the development of a local partnership also included in the in this policy area, but still we struggle and we ask government to focus on more on the local civil society. Yeah.
You said the 2% of total budget goes to civil society.
Yeah, civil society.
What about JICA? Do you have a statistic?
No, I don't have a exact number.
Can be same, okay, same with the very good policy coordination with FOICA and JICA. You're sharing both of problems too. So can I ask some sensitive question? So from ADB point of view, what do you assess? How do you assess this JICA FOICA performance or not overall, but working with the civil society? Because this is a very crucial question because many of civil society we are working in Asia, but 90% from come from outside of Asia, either America and Europe. You know? But we have the Japan and Korea. Why don't you support the fellow Asian countries civil society? That's a big question. So now ADB, how?
Fortunately, we have a good answer for this.
Okay.
So I think in general, Japan has been ADB's biggest contributor for grant money, bar none. Korea has come a little later, but has also been very generous to ADB and has several trust funds in ADB. So we really appreciate that. But specific to your question, I think we have something like 4 or 5 technical assistance projects that is funded by Japan for capacity building with civil society organizations specifically. So Japan has been through the ADB working on civil society issues, working on capacity, ensuring the ADB engages with civil society, bringing them to our projects. I think one of the things that that needs where things can be done better is to begin to look differently. There are some civil society organizations that are advocacy organizations, and they play a very, very important role. That's a specific type of capacity building that we can help with. There are other civil society organizations, there are service delivery civil society organizations, and that's a different type of capacity building. There are the international NGOs, there are the very local NGOs that are working on very small things. And I think we should differentiate all this, and that's something we're looking to do. But I think for us, both government, Korea and Japan have been very generous to ADB and have been pushing ADB to do more.
Wow, that's really great.
We can highlight the COVID-19 team.
So, Heidi, please.
I want to come
Heidi, come in.
So actually, I think there's a long history.
Yeah.
Very So Sam's my boss starting in June, but actually now he's acting for our chief of technical group, and a lot of the our gender technical assistants also come from Japan. So Japan has a special fund called Japan Poverty and Social Reduction Fund. And they've always asked us to write more proposal to work with civil society. So during COVID, there was a large TA, about $2 to $3 million, and it benefited 10 different NGOs. And Mongolia is one of the countries that the project is working to support marginalized communities and access to services during the time of COVID. So we have Thailand, Mongolia, Cambodia, Philippines. So list of countries, and there's a lot. The technical assistance is wrapping up this year. And then Korea also has a special education, knowledge fund and technology fund. It used to be very easy to access for civil society as well, but in recent years it's been changed slightly. So now it's going to support project development.
So we're working more to try to brainstorm on how we can get donor countries to put together a fund for civil society to access. So we're working with one or two international NGO, and we've been talking to different governments. So this is something that we're very interested in to help something to build capacities. But our South Asian department this year is processing 5 technical assistants, and they all will work with marginalized civil society in local groups. And one of the groups that will benefit is the LGBTQ community and elderly and people with disability. So what they call intersectional groups who have been marginalized for a long time. So my colleague Francesco Tornieri, I give a big clap to him because he's our gender specialist, but also civil society specialist, and he is working very hard to build capacity of civil society in South Asia countries. So there's more to come in that area.
Wow, that's really great. It is far more advanced than JICA KCOC. You have to share more your progress. Especially, I was happily surprised to know that ADB is supporting not only service delivery but advocacy. But that is not the case in JICA KCOC. Okay, James, you want to say more?
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear about your case because actually as we were talking about the quicker, but we have another organization, EPSD. So I can later on, I will if you give me more information on that, I will talk about with the EDCF to prepare the more funding for local CSOs. Yeah.
So EDCS stands for Economic Development Cooperation Fund. It's a loan. KCOC is a grant. EDCF is a loan. So we have 2 different systems. What about Japan?
So JICA provide actually technical conclusions, while MOPA provide loans and
So JICA providing the technical support for advocacy too, or service delivery?
sometimes for stabilization.
Sometimes.
Not always.
Okay. So this is the one the issue because as Sam rightly pointed out, many of us we are doing service delivery, which is basically very important to meet the need of the people. But at the same time, policy engagement, monitoring has become more and more important. But unfortunately, we don't get much support, especially the human rights NGO and also shrinking civic space. Policy engagement, sometimes we need to criticize the government. So this is the challenge. So I think that's important to promote this type of constructive yet critical engagement between the government and civil society.
Anselmo, I'd like to ask the open society here. So maybe open society can explain to support the advocacy role.
Okay, maybe it is are you feel comfortable to say something? Or Open Society is one of the private foundation from the United States, but they opened the office here in Korea for Asia, Northeast Asia. So unless you want to say, do you have any money to support her? Okay, please stand up. Very short. Okay.
I'm Chang Ho. I've been working for the East Asia program of the Open Society Foundation. So I'm a part of the Asia Pacific division of the Open Society Asia, Open Society Foundation, but I'm only covering Northeast Asia, and we had a different team working on Southeast Asia and South Asia. So maybe I can comment only on the Northeast Asia side. And we also have work on the China and Hong Kong, but because of security issues, we cannot share that much in here. But we echo with his comments as well as your Ali's and Jane's comment on the JICA and KCOC approach, and we have we would like the Japanese or the South Korean governments to play more roles to support like a CSO in the region in a variety of ways. I'm not exactly sure whether the existing mechanism of like a JICA or the KCOC can be possible to provide that support, because these 2 countries policy is based on the demand and the request from the recipient country. It's always a case that why don't we support directly the civil society? Then they say because the request doesn't come from the recipient country. So we're wondering what kind of arrangement is possible. For example, I'm not entirely in support of just following the US practices, but for example, in the US, they had like separate funding mechanism, like the National Endowment for Democracy. And I know that there are some separate discussion in South Korea whether South Korea can provide a similar kind of funding mechanism, and also the similar discussion is happening in Japan. So and considering that President Biden in the US, it's also US the biggest contributor to the ADB, is also promoting, democracy support, in a little bit of geopolitical context because of the Indo-China framework and so on. So we're just wondering how Japan and South Korea can provide more support for the like CSO in the region. I think that's why we have to discuss more.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your sharing. Koika JICA is a bilateral donor, and then ADB is a multilateral donor. Open society is a private donor. So I think for civil society, we need to diversify our funding opportunity, bilateral, multilateral, private. Anyway, eventually we all go common goal, public goals. So I think they're very useful information, especially shaking civic space, because their name is open society. And also in terms of actually 16, which is very important, peace, justice, inclusive, So then we can work together as a public and private. So the time is almost, we have 20 minutes left. So let's go to the last question. It's a youth 2030 agenda, all depends on youth. I know this time there was a 6 youth ambassador, ADB youth ambassador. Is they in the room, youth ambassador? Wow. Okay, so let me invite the one youth panel. And then if you want, you can join also this last part. So what can be the role? Who is the youth? Yeah. These are both youth, biological and the emotional. Let's begin with the biological. Okay, what is the role of youth? Everyone's talking about youth, important youth. Do you feel really you are the main agent for change?
Well, so I think the answer is yes, and I think the young people in the room would say the same. Could you tell me if any of your organizations have a youth constituency?
Of course.
Do any of your organizations have youth constituencies?
Youth member in your
Yes,
organization.
you have youth members in your organization. And how many of you are youth? So that's 15 to 24, but let's say 55 to make ourselves feel better. Any of you youth? And young at heart. Okay, so cute. So well, what ASPE is doing is we feel like youth should be part of our ongoing engagements and advocacy work. And one of the initiatives that we have is the Youth with Action Research. So as the name suggests, it is young people doing research on their own and for themselves. And we provide them with support so that they can conduct research on mental health, on the impacts of COVID-19, on their education and on their lives. And the most recent one was on combating racism and identity-based discrimination in education. And we do not see youth as beneficiaries. We see them as partners and as agents of change. And I think one of the recommendations that I can put forward is that we need continuous support. So we need technical and financial support. We need capacity building. We need to ensure that there are no barriers in terms of our access to meaningful spaces where decisions are being made and our lives will be affected by those decisions. And also just to note that the responsibility and the burden of this responsibility should be placed on the shoulders of those who are in decision-making spaces and not only by the youth themselves. So adults.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Okay. And for ADB, I think, we have the youth ambassadors. We've had a meaningful youth engagement. And I think it's born of the thought that if you look at our demographics, clearly it's youth oriented. But the people who are at the planning, people who are in leadership, mostly old men. So but the point is that, we're building the future for the region, for the region, Asia, the Pacific. Without input from the youth of what they would like their future to be like, I think it's really important that they be. I remember going to school when my daughter was like 3rd grade or 4th grade, and the teacher said, as parents, you need to realize the jobs that your children will be competing for don't exist today. So when I went to university, all the jobs that you had, digital security was not a thing, right? And so look at it, you always need lawyers, but everybody likes to sue each other. You need doctors. But beyond that, right? What else is that? The influencer was not a job. So this is why it's important to engage the youth, and ADB feels that because yes, all these old people who are leading countries need to listen. I think there's two ways to do it. One way is to get them involved in the development planning process. So we have an example in Indonesia where Indonesia has a 5-year development plan. We got the inputs of youth into that development plan. It's very, very important. And then we get them involved at the project level. So, to do the advocacy, so, okay, this is good input. So I think this is something we want to build on. We had a Youth for Asia program. We're revamping that. Heidi's in charge of re-looking at that and how to get that going. So this is our thinking of why youth is important.
Okay, so may I invite two ADB youth ambassador, one man and a woman. I want to hear directly, your experience. Okay, who you want to say? Yeah, okay, please. The 1 minute. The mic. So into your mission and then your experience briefly, please.
Yeah, thanks so much for giving us the space to do this. We're super happy to be able to speak and to share our experience now. We have had a wonderful experience being youth ambassadors. We were organizing the Asia Pacific Youth Symposium just a couple of weeks ago. So we had that to get some of the insights from youth across Asia Pacific. And then at the same time, we had a wonderful experience as well, putting together something that we call the youth agenda, which is actually already done. It's something that we have focused on 3 different SDGs that we have. So in terms of involving the youth, it's something that we definitely have. But the question is what's next, right? The youth agenda has been built. We are putting it forward. We'd like more support in putting it forward as well, which we know we will get, right? So these are action points. We prepared a lot of action points of what the agency can do in order to involve us further. And so the next step is really what do we do in order to stay in the room and for our voice to be heard in the room.
What about you? Your name, you didn't introduce yourself. You didn't introduce yourself.
I'm Noah from the Philippines.
Okay. I'm Shamir from India. This opportunity. I think one of the words that was from one of the phrases was meaningful engagement. And I think that, and I know that this engagement has been really meaningful because, from taking photos to, planning the event, the UIS3, to, even being a secretary and doing the little things, the big things, we've been involved. We not just our voices have been heard, but we were part of the process. And I think that, this is not just an event, right? It is our event. We're working for it. So I think that has been really meaningful and it's been a great learning opportunity. In terms of now we have created a youth agenda. We would be presenting this youth agenda. Now it really is that what ADB is going to act upon, and hearing Sam say that yes, ADB wants to do this is like really, but we would really love it that yes, youth are involved and we will get more opportunity and we have more meaningful engagement. Okay, thank you. Let's give a big hand to youth and how long is your mandate? How many years? Mandate 1 year, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years? Your mandate to use it.
1 month.
Daniel.
What? But we're to extend that.
One month. Okay, we've been involved like since 6 months. 3 months. Okay. Now we're hoping to extend that and also have more young people. We don't need 6, but we can have more. Okay, I think 3 months enough. You can join other youth events. Youth engagement group, G20 youth engagement group, APSD, and also major group, one of the youth. Okay, you are both welcome. Please share your youth agenda so that let's continue. Okay, you on the ADB. All right, good. So welcome once again. So now before I invite the panelists to give a final word, take away, especially what can you do in the strategy coming 7 years? but don't make it too long. 1 or 2 keywords so that we can remember the keyword, for coming 7 years. Before that, is anybody want to make a comment, question very briefly? These are last chance. Okay, in the back. SM 1 minute, please. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. This was a really riveting discussion. I really enjoyed listening to it. I think my question would be, it's more of a comment and a question. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that the burden should not be on the youth. I think even when we think about the SDGs and the lack of progress and the regression, when we think about all of that, a lot of it comes down to a lack of political will. So I think a lot of times we like sit up and, oh, we need to get young people in rooms, we need to have them at the table. Representation means nothing without action. I think what my question to the panelists here would be, what do you think civil society's role when they're being sidelined to like service delivery and not being able to access funding and being shut out of civic spaces? What do you think civil society's role is to, make that political will happen? The SDGs are not going to be reached by 2030, but what do we do in lieu of that? And what do you think civil society's role is?
Okay, thank you, Megan. She's from Barbados. She's one of my students. I'm teaching at Adrian University. Instead of class in the campus, I wrote them here. It's all your school. Thank you. Any more comment, question, briefly? Okay, one briefly, then you first. Oh, but you have to get 20 seconds, okay? We have less and less. Mike? Thank you. Anyone? In the back, yeah. There first. Please raise your hand, those who want to speak. Okay, 30 seconds, please. Yeah. We have a first.
Hello, I'm John. Also happens to be Philippines national context. There are structures that already do exist with regards to formalized youth participation on the level of the state and local government. Something we call the Sangguniang Kabataan or youth councils. But oftentimes these councils tend to not have the capacity to run themselves, often tend to not have the funds to run themselves, and often are captured in networks of patronage and are not able to articulate the actual demands of youth in their area. So I suppose that's one thing as well to keep in mind for our speakers and for our panelists. More of a suggestion, more of a sort of note to raise rather than something concrete. Is that in many cases, there are formal structures that already do exist, but these formal structures find themselves quite hard to operate, even as they already do.
Where you need a formal one, or how to make it. Right, one more over there.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm with the International Organization for Migration. So I just want to take the opportunity to highlight the linkage between migration and SDG. It's a cross-cutting issue for the sustainable development and also a very relevant issue for most of Asian countries. But not all countries recognize the importance of or the linkage between migration and SDGs. And there's much more room to be desired in terms of integrating migration management in the strategic planning of sustainable development, as well as in terms of financing. For instance, climate change has driven more and more people in displacement. However, currently, most of the funding for management of displaced people as a result of this climate-induced disasters come from outside of the climate financing. So I'm wondering whether there will be consideration at policy-making level to include migration management in climate financing facilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one more. Last one.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Alberto Calegra. Great to see colleagues from the Philippines. I'm head of delegation, the National Federation of Red Cross Repressing Societies in Manila, based in the Philippines. Great to see my colleagues here. So from my side, as we speak, we're having also in Manila the youth engagement strategy for the Red Cross represent happening in the Philippines. So great to see that. I was part of the discussions back in 2012, from moving from MDGs, our 8 objectives, to the SDGs. I was part of the UN consultation process. So part of the stakeholders that we have to consult with youth. which by now should be leaders. So the question is, how do you see the role of youth today in pushing governments in pursuing those objectives as we move forward towards 2030? Because we need to be more effective, we need to be more efficient. I don't think we're going to get more funds, but I think we need to be more agile and more accountable.
Okay, thank you very much. So dear panelists, now all of the projections input. So now you need to give a 1 minute takeaway, concluding remark. And I just want to remind once again, this year, the second is summit, next year, future of the summit. The youth is one of the top agenda, intergenerational dialogue, and also role of youth. So you are most welcome, more than welcome to join this process of preparation for the World Social Summit. That's why I put the youth as our future agenda. Now, so who wants to speak first? The order of, I don't know what's the
Wait.
what's the idea? Okay, wisdom.
So very quickly, I think across the board, going forward for the SDGs or for the youth, the thing that we all need to focus on is to really identify what your value addition is. And what your value addition needs to be done in the context of how big your organization is. So let's say we're the Asian development, we're pretty big. We do about $30 to $40 billion of lending a year. So it's quite broad. Historically, ADB was set up to do infrastructure. In the 1967, 68, when we were formed, the World Bank was, of course, there. They were working around the world, but they weren't focused on Asia. And it was Asia. And Asia was just about to take off. So we were set up as an infrastructure bank. So our comparative advantage is infrastructure. But within that, with the SDGs, we've included 7 operational priorities, which are thematic: gender, regional cooperation, governance, environment. I'm overseeing that now. But so, our comparative advantage is infrastructure, but we've added these things because we're a bigger organization. If you're not that big and you're smaller, so to really figure out what it is that you're going to add, value that you're going to add. Based on that identification of value addition, then go forward. You go find the organizations that are funders, find the organizations that finance these things, and okay, look what I do. I do this very specific thing and work through. I was in charge of the clean energy program in 2005 when nobody was interested in doing renewables. I got thrown out of so many government offices saying, no, Mr. Taniwa, this wind energy is still very experimental. We're not interested. So, but I set up a clean energy fund. I raised $150 million for ADB from donors because the donors by that time had made climate change, targets. Okay, I said, okay, you give money to ADB, we will help you meet your own targets. So find that niche of who you are and match yourself up with a donor or with a development partner and look to do that. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, 2 keywords: value addition and infrastructure. These are the 2 keywords. Okay, now, Chief.
Okay. For our friend from Barbados, I think civil society has a very rich history. They have existed way before both of us. So we're not going anywhere. And I think we can, like Sam said, to map existing actors in the space that you're working on and to see who you can influence and what is strategic, and to leverage intergenerational learning with your mentors and your peers. And I also want to say that perhaps we need to expand our alliances further and lend our voices and efforts to broader areas promoting, climate change, development justice, tax justice, global citizenship, education, human rights, democracy, and to see how we can amplify the cause of education and put global citizenship at a higher agenda, especially since it's the link to all of these different areas that ultimately affect all of us, especially our human rights. And to know that we share a common understanding, a common humanity, and a common fate, especially that we're going through all of these crises right now. And I think, yes.
Okay, thank you for highlighting global citizen education, which is a target 4.7, which is a very important target. Where we can find the human rights, peace, gender,
Cultural diversity.
yeah, for the many important values. Okay, now Jen, you.
Yeah, for the first time, they talked about the Blackpink and BTS. So But you know, do you remember what kind of word SDG seek for in 2015 in the outcome document? What kind of word SDG is seeking yeah, in the outcome document? Transformative.
Transform our world.
Yeah, so I think transformation starts from the body. I mean, from the people, and the civil society organization should be the center to deliver the voices of people. But nowadays, I feel the civil society is not a center. It's the alienated. So I think civil society should lead the multi-stakeholders partnership to bring together and to focus on the people at this moment. Yes, that's it.
Leadership, not marginal. Lead for transformation. That's keyword. Lead for transformation. Okay, Aoi, please.
Thanks. And do you remember what I said? Three A's.
Oh,
Visions, accountabilities, actions. And this is not my final word because we talk about civic engagement and multiple partners. So I'd like to highlight 3 C's.
oh.
We should be critical. We should be very concrete. As Jane had a concrete figure from Korean OGA. So that's what we should know. We should have a data, concrete data, and we need to secure civic space. So this is 3 C's that I'd like to highlight at the end of this session. Of course, the list can be going wrong. I could also highlight 3 E's. Civil society is has expertise, just like they are said. We have experiences, and we should empower ourselves. 3 E's, 3 C's. Too many?
Together, ACEA.
Yeah, A's of these relations.
Okay, what is the experience in power?
Expertise.
Okay, the ambitious accountability action, critical complete civic space. Experience in power. Oh, now, good enough. What is your
I would say something similar in my own language, but unfortunately I can't do this in English. But I just want to say that the civil society is full of optimism. They never give up. They will continue. When the governments try just, consider just economic growth, civil society actually brings to the table environment and people's human rights issues. And then civil society now uniting. In case of Mongolia, for example, environmentally and human rights and social issues, working civil society organizations uniting for achieving SDGs, because SDGs actually covering all of this: environment, people, governance, and everything, so economy, etc. But what we need is that we really to have this functioning, effective multi-stakeholder partnership. But unfortunately, we don't have. We have just very ad hoc multi-stakeholder committees or working groups. They just for very limited task and work just very limited time. But we need to have this permanent, effective, functioning, and responsible multi-stakeholder partnership, which actually need to be led by civil society organizations, because civil society organizations have no own interest. They are led by all public interests, so that they will balance the interests of private sector and then the interests of those highly politically, elites or decision makers who actually may have all this risk of being corrupted. Okay, so this is one thing. But the other thing is that for doing this, we have to have very good policy coherence mechanism. Unfortunately, we don't have in 14 countries establishing this policy coherence mechanisms. And then 1771 indicated actually the government's obliged to spend money for civil society partnership for establishing and leading this multi-stakeholder partnership. I think that we need to advocate for this. And then the very final thing, we need our governments make more ambitious political commitments, and we need to, they monitor whether they do this. And I think that the Vienna mechanism need to be more effective, making the influence of the government, more, how to say, important.
Thank you. Three things: effective multi-stakeholder partnership and policy coherence and the political commitment. These are the three key messages from Burma. So concrete number is it. Now, Uchita, so you give us like a keynote presentation. I still remember, the slogan of this ADB annual meeting is recover, reconnect, reform. But he proposed another 4 V: recalibrate, reimagine, reorganize, reinvest. That's what you thought, alternative to the English. So what is your conclusion after this 1 hour discussion?
Thank you. I've been listening patiently, not my proper great lunchtime minutes. Great, and for the first time in my life after 35 years of conferencing. I'm going old. And from the first summit to now. First thing is I'm pleasantly happy to see more young people in the room. When I was invited to take over as the advisor to the government in 2016, 24th of February, to set up a vision, the roadmap, and set up the country, there was no blueprint for a sustainable development anywhere in Asia Pacific or the world. I had to do this. The first thing that I did was bring in 15 young people, 12, 13 interns, and ask them to work with ministers, secretaries, scientists, provincial leaders, and all civil society, open door. My door was basically open all the time and walking in. And please understand, consultations are an art of deception as well. You bring people into the room, you take their signatures, you pacify them and make them feel big. That is what we have done. We have invested for the last 7+ years in a group of young people who this time around when we did the VPR, they led all 17 working groups with top-level scientists in the country to top-level bureaucrats and politicians. And all civil society. Please understand, you walk into a civil society room, what you said is the same. Old men dominating, and in civil society, old women also dominate. And this is a fantastic tool. Thank you. Right? What we need to do, and the question that you ask is the hope. Look, people like us go on hope. I was doing a training for one of the top 4 giants, global giants on sustainability. I know I may really do that, but this is the last few minutes that I'm taking, and that doesn't work, right? I'll be patient. You need to be patient, right? And also, please understand that the transformation that was intended from a 21st Agenda 21 into a 2030 agenda was about leaving no one behind, which means an inclusive transformation from design to planning to implementation to stock taking and reporting. It is not that you bring people into particular segments of the thing and write reports which makes no sense of direction on it. Your little projects and programs, heavily funded, makes no meaning when the 6th assessment report, if you have read it, that comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says that we are making little progress while our choices that we make is business as usual and more. So the karma that we have to pay, you have to pay on our rights is maybe huge. So thank you for coming into the room. Inclusive transformation. Fragmentation is something I mapped 425 institutions only in the Sri Lankan central government alone, which had 52 cabinet ministries, the highest in the world, I think, for the 169 targets. Poverty eradication needed 128 agencies. No one works together. right? So please understand, the fragmentation is something that your education system decides, your science plans and gives you, and your policymakers try to push down your throat. And civil society's role is not about just putting reports out or just making statements, but quality research and standing up with all stakeholders in the same room, respecting other stakeholders, engaging with other stakeholders, and working with the agencies together with your head high. Thank you so much.
For with the fire, for the fire, energy, passion. Thank you for bringing us again. Okay, sorry, now it's coming to end. Let's close our session. I cannot summarize it. So here's a summary report. And then we share all the PowerPoint. This PowerPoint a lot of power. And lastly, I want to share my keyword SDG. In SDG stand for many things. In Korean context, especially today, this evening, SDG means singing, dancing, girl group. Just a music.
Let's also thank Anselmo for
we have a photo. Let's see the beginning and then now. After that, you can join us. So please stand up.
Can I close? Yeah, you can end it. Let me go there. I